Coming up next on the Witness the World podcast. Become a person of value.
If you look at a lot of successful people, they have this perfect trifecta of passion, ability, and hard work. All three of those things come together. Roger Federer, he didn't go into tennis thinking, I want to make millions of dollars. He went in thinking, I'm pretty good at this, I love it, and because of those two, I'm also willing to work hard, and that's why they achieved the results.
The Witness the World podcast represents the personal views of the host and guests at the time of recording. These views may change over time. The content here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any content here should not be construed as financial, medical, or any other type of professional advice. Please consult with a qualified practitioner should you require any professional advice. Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode 14 of the Witness the World podcast. My name is Ben Choi, and today we'll be heading to the United Kingdom. Our guest is a financial advisor, a transformational coach, and an author. He's also a podcaster, a highly ranked Judo fighter, and a member of Mensa International. Today, we'll learn about his journey and how he helps others achieve their financial planning and personal development goals. We'll also explore some key ideas and approaches and how we can all become a person of value. Jeevan Matharu, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ben, for having me on the show, and thanks for the great introduction as well.
Great to have you here. So Jeevan, I can't remember where there was a time in the world where we had so many crises simultaneously happening all at once. We've got, inflation, banking system issues, geopolitical instability. It seems to be touching everyone everywhere. So with the financial advising work that you do, you connect with lots of people, every day. So I'm kind of curious, what's the general sense of people, like what are they thinking and what are they feeling? And in the UK right now.
Well, for me, I think it's a case of depending on your mentality determines how you view things. So there's always going to be crisis, isn't there, on the financial front? You've got COVID, you've got the Russia-Ukraine situation, you've got the knock-on effects of inflation, you've got the Silicon Valley Bank situation. So over the past 2 or 3 years, as you said, you could look at things and say, oh, well, there's a situation going on, I'm not going to invest. There's a situation going on now, I'm going to hold fire. The question is, well, when is the right time? So depending on the mentality of individuals, just to back this up slightly, I primarily deal with individuals who are coming to the point of retirement. So 55 years onwards, they've built up a pot of money in pensions, etc. I think you've got 401ks there or equivalent, and it's something similar here in the UK. And how do we best use that to ensure that the person can retire comfortably? Now, it's not what happens in life, it's how you view things that's important. So if things are going badly, and we'll take the COVID era as an example, because I think this is the best example in this specific situation. So markets, as you know, dropped 20-30% across the globe. So there's 3 types of investors or 3 types of people. The first are those that were scared and they sold. They lost 20%, 30% of their portfolio. The second type of investor are the ones that held their investment, and after a period of 3 to 6 months, they saw their investments recover to where they were previously. And the third type of investor are those type of investors who saw it as an opportunity to buy. So what you can see is it's not what happens, it's the mentality that you have that determines the outcome. So if you were the first person, you lost, let's say you've got 100 grand invested, you lost 30 grand. The second person made his money back, and the third person actually made 30% on his investment during that time. So, in answer to your question, what are people feeling? I think it depends on who you speak to and what their view on what's happening in the world at the moment is. And that's where the advisor comes in, isn't it? To say, well, actually, are you looking at things in the right way? Or maybe do you need to take a different approach in obviously the opportunities that's there? Because we don't look at problems as problems, we look at problems as opportunity. And that I think is the case when things don't necessarily go too well.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Jeevan. So, we talked about the inflation side of things. Have you seen family, friends, like, have they made adjustments on, their spending and what they do? And they look at maybe if we can save a little more, maybe there's extra savings that we can have opportunities to do other stuff with it and rejig things that way. Have you seen a lot of changes in people's like mindsets when it comes to that?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, the cost of living crisis, as it's coined, it's a case of cutting your cloth accordingly. So people might not be going on holiday as much, or they might be going on somewhere on a more domestic basis, so within the country and spending less money in that regard. But it's definitely had an impact on pockets. Um, as you said, inflation is very, very high at the moment, and we can see that with the federal bank or Federal Reserve, where they're increasing interest rates because they generally have a 2% target, don't they, of wherever inflation is. They want interest rates to be within 2% of that to ensure that the economy runs as smoothly as possible. But for individuals who have got mortgages or individuals who have got borrowing within their businesses, for example, as well, they've seen a massive uplift in their expenses with not necessarily an equivalent increase in revenue. On the flip side, if you're a company like Apple that has got huge cash reserves, interest rates increasing are a massive positive, aren't they? So I think it depends on your situation as to how you're going to be affected. Because for some people, the current situation is benefiting individuals. So I think it depends on where you sit on the chessboard as to how you're affected by the current circumstance. But yeah, absolutely. There's been a huge uh, impact of the basic bills, let's say, gas, electric, water rates, etc., that have increased. And in order to keep level, where do the decreased expenditures come from? And it generally comes from luxury items and your disposable income, doesn't it?
The thing that speaks to me is perhaps there's like a disconnect from where, the people in power, adjusting rates and forecasting economics for a nation and the world. And you compare that with, let's say, you or I, the everyday person, and their, specific individual budgets. Like we have to take what they say with maybe that grain of salt, but then see how what all these different macro implications are affecting me. So at the end of the day, that's where we got to look inward and say, hey, you know what, they're saying one thing, but the reality is a little bit different, and I got to make sure I adjust accordingly. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it depends on where you're trying to view this matter. Are you trying to view it at a normal average Joe blogs level, or are you looking at the whole system in general and saying, okay, well, is the Federal Reserve fractional banking system something that can be good moving forward? Because I think it was 1971, President Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard, didn't he? And that had a massive implication as to the inflation rate and the value of the dollar. And then you could go a level deeper and say, okay, well, the dollar itself is the major world currency, which all other currencies are pegged to. So the sterling currency, for example, or the yuan, whatever, they have a breakdown of what percentage of each currency makes up their currency, essentially. So how's that going to have an impact? So there's a lot more to it than obviously what we're seeing at ground level, and it's whether that system needs to change because private banking families actually lend monies to government at interest. Who are these families, and why are they in a position to control countries and economies in the way that they've done over substantial period of time? The COVID situation, even their decision to close economies and print huge amounts of money has now had this knock-on inflation effect, which has impacted us. Now you can look at that two sides of the coin. It was necessary because of X, Y, and Z, or it was done purposely in order to reduce our quality of life. And that's two ends of the spectrum, of course, and we can have a viewpoint in the middle somewhere. But there is definitely an essence of the system is rigged against us to some extent, but it's up to us to try and alleviate that. Because look, we can all make the same excuses. Oh, interest rates are this, inflation's that. We're in a position where there's a fractional reserve banking system, cost of living is going up, etc., etc. My viewpoint is saying, okay, well, we've all got, bar a few families, etc., at the top, we are all playing the same game. So how come people like Jeff Bezos and all these other elites can still make money? And the reason is, and it comes down to the whole point of my first book, is if you become a person of value and you provide enough value, these small changes don't have a huge impact on you. Because if you're Amazon and you're delivering items at good value to individuals across the globe, ordered today and it's going to be arriving tomorrow, that convenience cost is what builds your value. And yes, you might have to make changes within the business and say, well, look, we need to get rid of a few staff. But at the end of the day, that value still remains. Peter Jones, I don't know if you're familiar with who he is. It's a bit like Shark's Tank in the US. You know how you've got investors there and people pitch ideas to them. There's a guy in the UK, Peter Jones, he's on Dragon's Den, which, as I said, is the equivalent. And he made £250 million or £200 million. He lost it all and made it all back. Now, what that shows, and Mike Tyson's another one. He lost £60 million, didn't he? Or $60 million, and he's now worth 400 million. And the point to take away from that is that people can take away your money, but they can't take away your value. And if you retain your value, money will always come in. Mike Tyson, he can, as a person, be a boxing coach. He can get interviewed. He has an inherent value himself. Peter Jones, the other guy that I mentioned, he might have lost his money, but he's still got his network, his business acumen, what he's learned from running businesses, the derived determination, all these softer skills. So even if you're down and out, you're not necessarily down and out if you focus on providing value. That is the key.
Thanks for that, Jeevan. So what I kind of gathered from that is, regardless of how the financial system is set up and how it is, focus on what you can do out of it, and I guess also probably educate yourself and make sure you understand the dynamics, and then how best you can utilize what is and what it can be for you. So having said all that, we have a saying in Canada, it's like focus on where the puck is going, not where it's currently at. So same thing with, I guess, football or soccer analogy, focus on where the ball's going, not where it's currently at. So having said that, like on the understanding what the system that we have and also the system that we may have in the future, I mean, with all the problems with the existing system, you touched on many of those themes about like the endless money printing, and then we've had interest rates, they go down to record levels and then they go up to like, it's such a rapid clip they've increased. Also the financial engineering that has gone down, short-term profits at the expense of long-term stability. So I think some of these things are, undeniable facts. And I guess where I'm kind of going with this is where the ball is going. So what in the future, knowing all these things that have happened, like what do you see the future of the system and how do we incorporate that in our lives? Because I think things are changing now with the system. Maybe we get a lot more digital-based type systems that some people feel more stable, and some people would argue that maybe it's not, and or maybe we have a system where it's backed by some sort of asset, limited supply. I think where I'm going with this here. So just wondering, what do you see as someone that's been in the financial services world for quite some time? And like how do you see the future shaping, and how should we adjust to this possible future?
So I think there's always two sides to the coin, isn't there? There's the viewpoint within the financial system, those that work in finance, to say, actually, these things do happen. Within the capitalist system, you will have banks that fail, you will have companies that fail, and that's the whole point of capitalism, is to say that, look, things can fail, but we will try and keep on moving forward. So the Silicon Valley Bank, for example, they essentially, for those that don't know, it's a bank, I think it's the 13th largest in the US that essentially went down because of the interest rate rises. They had investments in bonds, and when interest rates rise, the values of bonds go down, and that's what essentially shafted them to an extent. that's one side of things to say, well, actually, things are still going to be okay. We get dips in markets, we get dips in the economy. That's fine. There's also the other side of the coin to say, are the elites trying to move us into a more of a centralized, globalized state, essentially, where there's a bit like China, essentially, where it's a social credit scoring. Is it going to be one world currency? Are we going to have like essentially like a NATO, but with all countries collaborating to ensure that we as individuals are monitored in all different levels? So I think there's really, depending on how deep you want to go with this, which of those is correct? Is it just that all this other stuff is conspiracy? There's never going to be a case of one new currency, a global collapse, etc. Or is it that, as we've seen in the past, 2008, the COVID situation, Russia, Ukraine, things do change, but we need to adapt accordingly. I hope that answers your question, unless you want to veer off somewhere from there.
It's a good overview there. So I guess one thing I'll probably add to that is neither of us, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's the better system. But I think what I have noted, like over the last couple of years, is that whether system A or system B is better, I think everybody should say, like, we don't have the answers. But I think what is important is we have these discussions to say, system A, pros and cons, system B, pros and cons, and have that robust, debate and conversation. I think having that conversation, that's been a little bit negated over the years because of, the interest from either side, from the other sides of the coin, I guess, as you term it there. So what your thoughts are, because there are people, and elites, as you call them, that think that they know, what is the best way to shape the world and the system. It seems like there's a small group of people that think it's best for all. And we probably have to have more robust discussions like we're having today to figure out, is this, the best for society as a whole and for our respective countries?
Well, I use COVID as an example because I think it's just a great example for many things. We were told by governments to stay in our house, wear masks. Whether that was the right thing or to do or not is irrelevant. The point is that if we all decided collectively that we weren't going to follow these guidelines, we weren't going to wear masks, we were going to continue to go out and see people, does the system have enough enforcement to stop us all? It doesn't. So we are the problem in some respects. If we decide that a new system is incorrect, or even what's going on in the world currently, people don't stand up. People don't stand up for what people can talk all they want on podcasts or to friends, but it takes action. And the problem is, and again, I use a really cool example here. If I was to organise, so let's say we're all in school or we're all working at the same business, and I suggested we need a pay rise. We're not going to go into work tomorrow. We're not going to call it a strike. All of us just aren't going to go into work tomorrow. And we're all going to get phone calls from the boss to say, look, where are you? We say, look, we're not going to work unless we get a pay rise of 10%. If I was to instigate that, what would happen is that everyone else would still go to work out of the fear of losing their job. And I would be the one stuck at home and I would get sacked because I didn't come into work and people would say what I'd planned. And it's very much like that today. For those people who do try and admit change, a lot of people agree with their viewpoints, but they aren't willing to back that person up or stand with that viewpoint. And then the person who did say all these things gets shut off Facebook, off Twitter, off Instagram, and they get quietened by the mass media, the technocracy that we've got currently. And then people go back to living their normal lives and get back on the hamster wheel. So I think it's us that's the problem, and the understanding of how we're manipulated. So corporations, for example, everyone hates the fact that corporations pay very little tax. Yeah, they pay 0%, 1%, whatever it's going to be. Number one, that's how the system is operated. Number two, if you think of it from a government standpoint, so let's say I'm in America and I'm going to allow a business to pay not much tax because it's going to encourage that business to move their headquarters to the United States. It will then allow them to employ thousands and thousands of individuals who are then going to get a job and pay tax directly to the government. So if we don't like things, but we agree to them by acting in a way that means that we agree to them, how do we ever expect change? It's a case of acting in one way but complaining still. The best way to complain is to not acquiesce to the rules and regulations that are set. But ourselves as individuals are very weak in that regard, and that's why things will never change as far as I'm concerned. People say, "Oh, we will have world peace." We won't because of human nature. Will we overthrow things? No, because we can't even rally up troops to implement change anymore. And that's the problem is the smartphone as well, because we are on a daily basis, our perceptions are changed by the things that we read. Oh, because our perceptions change our behavior. And if for most people they are sheep, they can't think, as you said, critical thinking. Obviously, you're a smart guy. You started your own show. You're asking these questions. For everyone else who has had the same job, working at McDonald's or KFC or at the local bank, whatever, they work 9 to 5, they go home, they put on the TV, they watch Netflix, whatever it's going to be, and they don't think about these sorts of things. So if most people are like that, it doesn't matter if the few percent who understand things, how are they going to influence these other people who are ignorant? Because another phrase that I love is the emptiest vessel makes the loudest noise. So have you had a beer crate, not a beer crate, the canister things that beer comes in. If one's full of beer and you hit it, it just makes a dull noise. If one's empty and you hit it, it's going to vibrate and make loads of loud noise. And it's the same with individuals who are low in intelligence. They make the loudest noise, but they don't have the biggest substance.
I see. That's a interesting analogy there, Jeevan. So, yeah, from what I get from your response there, so I mean, inaction is also an action, and I think it sounds like society as a whole, like, and we are a product of our actions and inactions. So collectively, if we have all stood by and see the system create the way it is, I mean, that's just what we got as that's the collective result of it. So yeah, I think we had some good discussion there, Jeevan, and I kind of want to circle back now to your background. You were been in the financial services kind of arena for some time now, and just want to get a little background on how a misfit from private school found his way over to the financial services field all those years later.
Okay, so I'll give you a brief synopsis of my journey up to this point. So always quite smart at school, was doing like exams early and in the top sets, etc. But what, well, now I realise, but looking back, it's not just about your ability, it's about your attitude and your behaviour that determines results. So I was thrown out of school, I went to private school, thrown out. And it took me some time to realise how jobs still did okay, but I was underachieved really for what my ability was. And I came to a point working full time, thinking, well, it doesn't matter if you've got a Ferrari, if you don't know how to drive the car, it's pointless. So I started to realize that it's a mentality and a habit and a routine and setting goals, all these other soft parts that make you an individual who's going to achieve something. Now, throughout that time period, I was still working as doing my exams to become a financial advisor. I first of all wanted to go into accountancy like my dad, but transpired it's very, very boring. Accountancy is very backwards looking, what happened last year, etc. Whereas financial advice is more people friendly, it's planning, it's looking forward, it's looking at the global economy, etc. So I started doing that. It is something that I enjoy. But off the back of that, I started looking at personal development. I wrote a book. I now coach others to, much like my own story, come from a position of messing around, getting thrown out of school, to actually, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? What daily habits do I need to incorporate? What mindset do I need to be able to move forward, etc., etc., etc. So that's sort of what I do now as well. And I'm writing a second book as well. So you can see that there's a whole sort of circle there from an individual who messed around in school, thrown out of school, underachieved, to now be on the other end, helping others to increase their level, writing books to again help individuals, and working as a financial advisor, helping people retire. So sometimes in life you can come full circle. And look, if I've done it, you can do it too.
Well, that's a good way of putting it. And just curious, I talked about the Mensa thing in your intro. Like where did the Mensa International kind of piece come into play? I mean, you probably never thought of that doing something like that. I guess early days, but was that along the path there? You thought this would look interesting. You kind of delved into it, and or maybe as a younger kid, you kind of thought things differently, and then your parents kind of got you involved. Say, hey, well, are you maybe this is something for Jeevan because yeah, he thinks differently, he acts a little differently. Maybe there's something there. Like, just maybe you can tell us a little story behind that.
Yeah, so this is probably at the age of 30, so I'm 33 now, and this was just pre-COVID, essentially. I came to the realization that I'm now 30 years of age, and 30 is quite a big age in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, you get ages, don't you? You get your 16s, your 18s, 21s, and then 30, and then every 10 years probably is the next, big birthday. So I got to 30 and I thought, okay, well, I need to start thinking longer term. I need to change my behavior even further than what I've done over the previous few years. And there's two things that I want to sort of establish. One is we need to look at results more. If I say I can do something, I need to prove it. So this is where the mentor thing came in. So I consider myself quite a smart person. People say I'm, quite intelligent. I have good insights that a lot of people don't have. I'm going to do an IQ test and I'm going to do the Mensa one because that's the official one and that's the one that you get accepted if you're within the top few percent. So I took the test and obviously, I got in. Alongside that, I also came to, and it's something that I read, I think, with the Stoics. They said, hang on to your youthful enthusiasms. They will help you much more when you're older. So I started to think, and just to backtrack slightly, if you look at any or a lot of successful people, they have this perfect trifecta of passion, ability, and hard work. All three of those things come together. Roger Federer, he didn't go into tennis thinking, I want to make millions of dollars. He went in thinking, I'm pretty good at this. I love it. And because of those two, I'm also willing to work hard. And that's why they achieved the results. And you all know people at school who were the businessman selling sweets for profit. You know, the guy who was charismatic and good with girls. You know, the sporty guy who was always going to make it in the sport. You know, the maths geek. You knew the chemistry nerd. You knew these people who at a young age had this ability that they could use later on in life, as per the Stoic phrase. So I sat down and thought, okay, well, what did I really enjoy as a kid that I was half decent at? And not in a bad way, but I was one of those people who were quite good at everything, but not. There wasn't like, for example, Wayne Rooney, football player here in the UK. He's obviously not a very intelligent guy, but he was really good at football, and maybe he didn't have anything else that he was good at, and it was pretty obvious what he should be doing, if that makes sense. But for some other people, because they are more generalists, they are good at quite a few things. It's like, well, where do I aim the sail, essentially? So I sat down and I thought, okay, well, what I need to think about what I enjoyed in a number of key areas. And sport, I decided to think about sport as well. And that's why I decided to take up judo again. I did do it as a child for about 3 years, and I started up again at age 30. And, whether whether I am or not, rather, I got into the top 16 last year for under 73 players in the UK. Now, as I said, it's not about whether I am or whether I'm not, because in reality, I'm probably not. But it's, again, the result, it says on paper, that's where I am. Because in order to do that, you have to have the right mentality, the work ethic, the enjoyment of it. Those three things are going to give you the chance to be the best version of yourself within that remit. And that's what I decided to do. And as I said, it's been going well so far. And I'm going to continue to do that, training 3, 4, 5 times a week. You need to self-reflect. You need to have goals. You need to have daily habits. And you need to understand that learning is part of the process. To become a master, you need to be okay with being seen as stupid and ignorant. Everyone starts from somewhere. And that doesn't matter whether you're 30 years of age like I was, whether you're 5 years of age, or whether you're 50 years of age. You can start something, and it only takes a few years to turn stuff around. Colonel Sanders, the KFC bloke, I think at 65 years of age, he turned it around and made KFC, and now it sells the most chicken in the world. So it's never too late. Obviously, you'd prefer to do it younger because, I mean, having money and success at a younger age is always better than having it at an older age, and everyone knows that. but you can still do it. And here's a thought. So why do years go faster every year? And I worked this out the other day. It's because every year is a lower percentage of your overall life every year. So if you're 2 years of age, a year is 50% of your life, isn't it? In terms of how long you've lived. If you're 30, a year is the 30th of your life. At 60, it's the 60th of your life every year. So time essentially travels faster. So what you would prefer is to be successful earlier to have a much greater amount of time. Because if you're successful at 60, time's very, very short. And you're not in the best frame of mind. So I then began to get in a bit of a hurry to say, look, I need to use my time wisely. How can I kill two birds with one stone? If I'm washing the dishes, can I listen to podcasts? Can I learn something? Walking the dog, again, same thing. Can I write a book and share things for others? Because if you provide enough value, that's where the income comes from. You shouldn't focus on the income necessarily. There are some exceptions, of course. If you're purely a businessman or a trader, etc., that is where the value, if you can see what's going on. But for most things, it's providing a value will create you an income. And I start to think, well, how can I provide value? And there's really two ends of the scale, isn't there? There's education and there's entertainment. There are other bits as well, but education is one part, and it's helping others. I think it's very fulfilling as well to help others to achieve their best selves.
That's a great summary, Jeevan, and yeah, thanks for that background there. So, one kind of point that I kind of took from it, like you got through this Mensa later in life and probably had a different perspective going in there. And like I know people that probably have put their kids through these, special programs early on. And because you did it later on life, you probably have a totally different way of looking at this. And I've talked in some previous podcast episodes about the EQ side of things, and Mensa is more of an IQ side of focus there. So just wondering, what your take is, because you did a lot of personal development beforehand. What drives the bus? In my mind, it's the EQ drives the IQ. IQ kind of supports the EQ, or just wondering if you have that perspective, or are they all kind of connected equally? And as you develop yourself through life.
I think everyone's different, aren't they? We have like a spectrum of, as you said, IQ, 0 to whatever the number is, 180, 200. And we also have an EQ ratio that there's probably no numbers really to attach to that. What you do tend to find, though, is people very high in IQ tend to lack some EQ because they tend to do all of their thinking upstairs. They don't necessarily need to do their thinking by speaking to others and pick up on those social cues. And that's not always the case. But what I will say is that you need everyone on the spectrum. You need someone low IQ with high EQ to be your secretary, to be your event planner, to be that type of person, waiter, waitress, whatever. And then you also need the person at the high IQ range with like the i7, i8, i9 processing speed in their head, but with low EQ to be like a rocket scientist. Because that person doesn't necessarily need to have those extroverted qualities, let's say. They just need to be someone who can sit down and think through these things and using their high IQ. So the question isn't what's better. The question is, what are you? Are you introvert, extrovert? What's your IQ level? What's your emotional intelligence? And it's best to be honest with yourself, because when you're honest, like with a doctor, if you say this is my symptoms, they'll give you an answer rather than trying to make up what your symptoms are. Once you determine your personality type, archetype, IQ level, etc., what you enjoy, what you're good at naturally, all of these essentially parts of your psyche or ability, you can then decide what your next steps are. Because if you're an introvert who's low in EQ, you're probably not going to make the best salesman in the world. So why would you be a salesman? Because you're not going to see. I mean, you can work at it. I'm not saying you can't work and be better than you were yesterday, but are you going to get to the top upper echelons of that hierarchy? Probably not. So it's better to be a big fish in a small pond, isn't it? And you want to dominate the hierarchy that you're within. And because, for example, I could, let's say, I enjoy sprinting. I could train the 100 meters every day for the rest of my life, and I still wouldn't be faster than Usain Bolt. because I don't have the physical attributes and the natural tendency to allow me to be able to be good at that. So I'm not saying don't work hard. Absolutely, that's what half the book is about. Working hard and time, being good with your time and having the right mindset, all these sorts of things. But you also need to understand what type of tree you are, what type of breed of dog in some respects you are. That's what you need to look at yourself, or you look at yourself in that particular instance as well.
Yeah, those are some great thoughts, Jeevan. And so I guess part of it is recognizing, yeah, what kind of dog you are, and then also that, you know what, maybe if you want to choose to improve that, totally up to you. You can do that. I guess one of those things is, yeah, work on your EQ or IQ, whichever you choose to do, if that's what you want to do. And speaking of, like, working on the IQ thing, I wanted to get your take on the IQ, the Mensa International testing for IQ. I did some of those practice tests, and just wondering, yeah, like, do you think that those kind of tests, like looking at the pattern recognition, are really good ways or indicators of, assessing the IQ? I'm sure there's probably some other stuff, other metrics out there, because when you look at that, and then you see there's people that, that have, they got the book smarts, street smarts, they talk about that. And just wondering, yeah, like, what do you think of all the testing? Is it a good measure, or maybe it's just a measure that you probably should look in totality with a lot of other things?
Yeah, I think it's just a measure, as you said. I look at IQ as your processing speed. So if you're, as I said, an i5, i6, i7, i8 processor, that's your IQ. Now, it doesn't mean to say that, and as you said, it's only one way. There's many other ways that you can look at intelligence, but it also doesn't have a one-to-one correlation for success. It doesn't mean just because you're high in IQ that you're going to be the most successful. Let's backtrack slightly to myself at school. I was up there with one of the highest in IQ, but because of my attitude, because of the habits that I was in, because of my mindset, it didn't transpire to success. So what we need to understand is that yes, you can have the IQ, and it does help, of course, if you're smarter than someone else, it gives you some sort of advantage. But we also need to establish the softer skills. What's your determination like? Your focus, your organization skills, your ability to network, your ability to actually implement stuff, because it's all well and good knowing something, but implementing something is slightly different. What's your adversity to risk? Because what you sometimes find is those high in IQ tend to overcompensate the risks for the rewards. So they're not willing to take a punt on stuff because they say, well, actually, the risk is too high. Whereas sometimes those that don't overcalculate and, the analysis by paralysis by analysis, don't overlook at things. They just start a business and see where it goes from there. So I don't think that necessarily IQ is a great indicator of success, but it obviously helps. It's better to have a 6 litre engine in your car than a 2 litre. But how do you drive that car? That's the key part.
Yeah, thanks for those thoughts there, Jeevan. So I think this IQ, EQ conversation, it kind of segues well with personal development stuff that you do on the side, besides your day-to-day job in the financial services sector. And just wondering, I guess, how you kind of go about helping people. What's your process there? So I'll give you kind of a scenario here, and perhaps you can unpack this a little bit. So let's say I'm someone that's maybe living kind of an unfulfilled life. Maybe I got this job, doesn't really excite me. And I've taken this big first step, this brave first step. I want to, get feedback, from a consultant, an expert that's, does stuff in motivation and finding their true selves. And just wondering, like, how you would kind of go about starting that conversation with me and taking me through those first few steps.
Yeah, I think the crucial part to understand with sort of coaching is it's not about me telling you you should quit your job, move to Australia, get a job in banking, start investing your money into an ETF in the S&P 500, or all of that. The first part would be asking you questions. Why do you feel that you need to change? What is it you want to change? How did you get to where you are now? How do like, and then obviously we'll go through that. We'll try and work out what the fears are that's holding people back. Is it the fear of success, fear of failure, imposter syndrome? Is it the fear of being judged by others? Is it your mindset that's holding you back? Are you looking at the negative? So I'll give you a prime example. There's two individuals, both of them want to start a business. The first individual is looking at the risks. Oh, what if I lose my heart, my house, my car, lose my friends? What if it doesn't work? Putting everything on the line, etc., etc. Are they likely to start the business? Probably not. Whereas if an individual goes into it thinking, well, think of the freedom I'm going to have, think of all the money, because everyone obviously does look at money I'm going to bring in. Look at the enjoyment I'm going to have doing this particular role or business or industry, whatever it's going to be. Think of all the people that I'm going to connect with, the network. Think of all of the value I'm going to bring to individuals within this marketplace. Which of those guys do you think is going to start the business? The second. So a lot of it is not, it's how you're looking at things that determines your actions. If you want to run a marathon next year and that's your goal, we need to reverse engineer that into actionable steps, don't we? Or how much you need to be running in week 1, week 2, week 4, week 8, etc., in order to ensure that you're getting there. And then how do you measure that against your target? So to answer your question, it's very important to ask questions initially, because the answers are within you, and it's helping us get that information to be able to then work with you to find a suitable solution. Because a lot of the times it's low self-esteem. It's not dreaming big. It's, as I said, all of those fears that we mentioned earlier, imposter syndrome. So, for example, Ben, if you felt in your mind that you weren't a person who is respected for your opinion and your views on things, because who are you, little Ben? You would never have started your podcast. But because you understand that actually I do have value to bring, it empowered you to start your podcast. So a lot of it is that reprogramming, because from school we get programmed in a certain way. We get taught not to challenge authority. We get taught not to confer with others because that's cheating, essentially. We get taught to never question the narrative. We get taught never to think outside of the remits of the box. Sometimes it's about that reprogramming stage. Maybe it's your parents, the limiting beliefs that you have. Oh, I can never be rich. I can never do this because of my family. We've never done that. You will never achieve anything in life. And it's trying to get those thoughts and that program out of your mind, essentially, and reprogramming with something that's, is it guaranteeing you success? Absolutely not. But what it is going to do is it's going to give you a much higher percentage probability chance that you're going to achieve something because of the way that you're looking at things. Again, are you looking at value, or are you looking at just the money you can make? Jim Rohn once said that if you're looking for an above average job with above average pay without being an above average person, that's what's called frustration. And that's half the people out there. They're on Reed and Indeed saying, oh, what job can I get for 100 grand? But are you a 100 grand person? So it's all of those things that we look at initially. I will try and obviously work out what it is that's holding you back, and ask you questions like, some people say, well, I don't feel that I deserve this. Well, we need to break that down. Why do you not feel that you deserve this? And we'll go into detail and work out what it is that's again holding them back from that standpoint, and work from there. Because it's a lot of the time it's the questions that you're asking yourself. So Ben, again, we use you as a live example. Let's say you've come to me and said, look, I'm in a position where, like, I really want to grow my show. I've just started it. I feel like I want to quit it. We'd ask, well, do you think quitting is a good thing? Would you encourage people to quit in life? And they will say no. So I said, well, if you wouldn't encourage others, why are you quitting, first of all? And then we'd say, well, actually, okay, let's break this down. If you want to improve in your podcast, what makes a good podcast? They say, oh, we need to be a good host, you need to have good guests, etc., etc. And we say, okay, well, if that's the case, how could you improve your own podcast? And it's just a basic question. Oh, I need to get better guests on my show. Maybe I need to do better editing. Maybe I need to listen more to the guests and ask more penetrating questions. How can I niche down into a particular area and target a particular demographic? Now, you can start to see, as soon as you ask yourself those questions, you will try and search for results, because as individuals, we are very positive goal focused. So two examples. Everyone's heard it. Don't think of a pink elephant. Yeah, it's just the way that the mind works. We can either say to ourselves, "I don't want to smoke," or I'll give you a different example. "I don't want to be single," or "I want a relationship." They mean the same things, but to your subconscious, they don't mean the same thing. Because if you're saying, "I don't want to be single," you're thinking about being single and you're not really specifying anything. If you're saying, "I want a relationship," you're going to act in a way that's going to be like, "Well, I need to start going on dates. I need to filter down individuals to those who are worth dating, etc." So we need to have a positive based focus in order to achieve something. People always talk about what they don't want. We need to establish what it is you want and how you can best get there. And look, you might get things wrong, you might lose money, you might fuck up at the end of the day, but that's all part of it. We have to sometimes go back a few steps to elevate later on. And it's the mentality to say, whatever happens, if if you learn from something, it's not a failure overall because you've learned something and that's still a positive.
Those are some great thoughts, Jeevan. So, biggest takeaway there is we got to find a way to deprogram ourselves, especially deprogram the negative. I heard some statistic, yeah, years ago, like you hear the word no, I don't know, what's like a million times when before you are age 5 or something. So I guess we're kind of
Yeah.
conditioned in that respect. So in your work then, you kind of work on deconditioning, people that have gone there. And I guess that's part of helping them on that journey to say, you're thinking like things like this, but why don't you ask different questions? Is that kind of your process then as well? Like you say, hey, you ask someone to talk about this, they said this, and then you say, hey, you kind of mentioned it in this way, in this negative tone. Why is that? Have you thought about this? Is that kind of your general starting point there to just understand, how they take from years ago? Because that's when we got all our, programming essentially.
Exactly. So we use an example of someone who's lost their job. You can think of all the negatives you want. Oh, I'm not going to get paid. I'm never going to find another job. What about my bills, etc., etc. If you're just focusing on that, how is that helping you in any way, shape, or form? You're already in this position now. Looking backwards and thinking about the negative things is not going to be an optimal way to move forward. We just talked about looking at the negative versus positive. So I'm a strong believer that there's positives that can come from any situation. You've lost your job. Okay, cool. It's happened now. You're telling me there's not one positive. Could you not find a better paying job closer to home? Could you not actually find a job you enjoy with a better boss? Could you not start your own business? There's so many things that you could think of that will excite you to act in a positive way. And that's what you need to focus on. Because you can start over. You could say, well, actually, I've lost this job now. I can actually move locations. I could go traveling. There's so many things. And again, a lovely Jim Rohn quote I love that sums this up perfectly. If you imagine you're sitting in a hotel room and there's a glass window and there's the most beautiful view in the world that you've ever seen. Don't be the person who complains about the specks on the window or the bird shit on the window. Out of all the positives you've got, you think about the one negative. That's such a bad way to move forward in life. So yes, something's bad's happened, but think of the positives that can come from it. Anything you can name me, anything in the world, there's always a positive that can come from it. Sometimes it just takes you longer to think about. That's it.
That's great, Jeevan. So one concept I want to, add to this personal development discussion is you talk about in some of your previous podcasts this concept of skill stacking, and I think this is actually connects well with the building self-esteem thing because there's people out there when they're down in the dumps, that you think you don't have anything to offer in the world, you don't do anything right, but that is probably quite incorrect. I think they have a lot more skills than they think they do, and it's just a matter of letting them kind of like discover that for themselves and see it. And when you're skill stacking, even you're doing the little things, it's the little things that matter. You build yourself day to day, and then maybe have these routines to build more. And just wondering, yeah, if you can unpack the skill stacking concept and yeah, share a little bit of light onto that.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer that. So just before I actually say this, the world is changing so fast, and the probability of individuals now to let's say be the world's best financial advisor or be the world's best sprinter, the chance of you getting to that pinnacle is very, 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 very small. I can see a huge shift into what's called skill stacking. So, are you the only person in the world, let's say, that is a coach? Yeah, we'll use the example of a coach, but can speak five languages. Are you the only person in the world that is an IT solutions architect that also understands this particular business niche? So you've worked in financial advising for a number of years, let's say. You're an IT specialist, again, who speaks English and Spanish. That is a set of grouped skills that not many other people have. And that's where you can have that USP. So you can skill stack in loads of different ways. That's just a couple of examples there. So you need to think of, well, what are my major skills, and can I use this in a collective way to bring me success? So there's something called ikigai as well. I don't know if you've heard of ikigai, the Japanese term, where like a Venn diagram, and it says things that I enjoy doing, things that I can get paid for, and there's a whole like Venn diagram. So you work it and say, well, actually, what this could be my hobby, this could be what I get paid for on a day-to-day basis, this is my purpose, etc. And it narrows down into what's called an ikigai, and that should be your primary goal, primary purpose. And that's a little bit like what skill stacking is. So trying to use all of your skills together, like for example, you've got skills in the financial background, but you've also got good EQ skills and knowledge of other areas, which is why you can start a podcast. And you've obviously got great networking skills and ability to speak to individuals and good questioning techniques. That's a set of skills that allows you to have your own show. You've probably got a bit of editing skills, and if you don't, you can offset that to other individuals. Now, off the back of skill stacking, there's something I refer to as unrelated and related areas of improvement, or related and unrelated weaknesses. So if you're a tennis player and you've got a great serve, you've got a great forehand, but your backhand needs work, improving on your backhand isn't a related weakness. I don't like the word weakness, but you will use it for the purpose of this. If you improve on your backhand, your overall tennis game will improve. You might also have a weakness of being bad at maths. People say work on your weaknesses. We need to specify what type of weaknesses they are. What's the point of a professional tennis player working on his maths equations because he's bad at it when he could work, because that's an unrelated area of improvement or an unrelated weakness. We need to focus on related weaknesses. So coming back to skill stacking, if you've got three skills, is there maybe a skill that you're missing that could gel it all together? Maybe it's the EQ, maybe it's the communication skills. You might have all of these other skills, but there's this one part, this one nugget that you need just to bring everything together. You see this in football. They've got good players, but they're missing that one player who's maybe not the best player in the world, but the one that gels everyone together, centre midfielder maybe. And it's the same. Maybe we need to sit down and think, what is that additional skill I need to gain in order to get that perfect stack?
Thanks for the share there, Jeevan. Yeah, those are some good concepts there. So, I guess just to wrap up on the personal development side of things, in your mind, maybe what are the one or two questions that people could ask themselves today to, start them on that self-improvement development journey today if they didn't really resonate with any of those concepts, but like what could they do right now today? Ask themselves two questions that might turn on that light bulb to get them on the path. I'm sure people have asked you this before, but I thought I'd pitch it over to you, and yeah, maybe that might ring a bell for people.
Well, I'm actually writing a book at the moment that's, excuse me, a question a day for a year. So you write down the answer to a question that I've put down in the book. I've put a bit of an insight into what you should think about, and then you write your answer. And two of them are coming to mind. There's 366 in there, and equally, very good questions. The first is the first question in the book, which is, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? I think that's a really good one to think about, because what you don't want to do is end up in a midlife crisis thinking, how the hell did I get here? what would my ideal life be, and how do I plan myself to get there? That's a really good one. The second one I think is an underrated question: is what compliments do I receive on a regular basis, or what do I get told I'm good at? Now, people do not give credit lightly. People will only tell you something good, i.e., compliments, if they really enjoyed your food or they really think you're good at football or whatever it's going to be. And we need to pay attention to that, because if we are getting compliments in the same area over and over again, and we're not doing anything about that, that's a massive missed opportunity.
Interesting. Okay. Jeevan, as we're kind of winding down the podcast here, you covered a lot of interesting concepts, and I hope people have got a lot of insights there. I always ask my guests a two-parter question to kind of wrap things up here. So here goes. What are you most grateful for, and what are you most looking forward to in the future?
There's a couple of things I do every day in the morning. I write down what I'm grateful for, past or current. I write down what I'm grateful for that's going to happen in the future, faith or future gratitude. I write down my goals, and I write down affirmations. So I write down every day things that I'm grateful for. It could be I'm grateful for the dog that I've got. I'm grateful for the client meeting that I've got in. I'm grateful to be on your show today. They're the sort of things that I'll be writing down tomorrow morning. As an example, grateful for the weather picking up today. Little things. In terms of what I'm most grateful for, I think it's very difficult to put one thing, because I'm a believer that, as I said, you need to be continually grateful for everything that comes into your life, because everything that I've got, someone else is jealous of. Everything that you've got, someone else is jealous of. Like I've got my own show, podcast. I've been on, like, I speak on podcasts. I've got my own book. I work as a financial advisor, coach. I've got a dog, a house, a car. All of those things someone else wants. I've got a car. Someone doesn't even have a driving license, so they are jealous. So I need to be grateful for everything that I have in my life. So it's of equal gratitude, but that's the mentality that I have when I think about gratitude. The second part of the question was what am I most looking forward to in future? I'm looking forward to see where I can be in my own personal development journey in 5 years' time. Because if at the moment, I'm speaking on great shows like yourself, and I'm bringing in new clients and writing books, it's going to be interesting to see where that will take me in 5 years' time. So to see what the future development could be, and it might be that I go backwards. It could be that I go through something and I fall flat on my arse, but it's the experience of life that is important, and how we then move forward to get closer to what we are meant to be.
Those are some great words to leave us off with, Jeevan. So, if people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
So I've got my own podcast now called the Vanquish podcast. I've got a book, Become a Personal Value, as you've mentioned. I've got Vanquish Transformational Coaching. I've got a new book coming out that's not yet named, but that's going to be your individual copy that you can write your future plans in. So there's any of those really that you can obviously reach out to me. And yeah, I'll be happy to help.
Excellent. We'll be sure to add those to our show notes. So that's a wrap for episode 14. Thanks for joining us, and namaste, everyone.